Iraq's prime minister on November 9th came out with some tough words on attempts by several provinces in the country to establish autonomous zones in the country. Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki warned that every single piece of Iraq's territory should be governed by its central government. Al-Maliki's statements have implications for the domestic balance of power at a time when U.S. forces are about to withdraw from the country, but more importantly, it speaks volumes about the regional tug-of-war, particularly that between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Now that it's clear that the United States will be withdrawing its forces completely from the country, save a few hundred troops that would be engaged in security for diplomatic and international entities in Baghdad, Iraq's minority Sunni community is feeling threatened and is trying to make the best use of the options that it has available. And one of the options is to establish an autonomous zone within its areas, at least one, if not more, as a means of trying to counter the overbearing power of Iraq's Shiite-dominated government, which on its end is trying to make use of the American withdrawal to consolidate its hold over the new Iraqi republic. The move on the part of Iraq's disenfranchised Sunni community has the Shia majority worried, because from the point of view of the Shia, their hold over power is a very nascent development. And with American forces leaving, it is creating a new dynamic in which that balance of power needs time to settle, and they're worried about any attempts by the Sunnis to disrupt the attempt of the Shiites to consolidate their influence in the post-Ba'athist republic. So what we have here is a revival of a Sunni-Shia tug-of-war at a time when American forces are not going to be around to prevent a direct clash. It is not inevitable that there will be a direct violent clash. Much will depend upon how both sects and their principal stakeholders are able to negotiate with one another. But far more important than the role of the Iraqi factions is the role of their external patrons. In the case of the Sunnis, it is Saudi Arabia, and in the case of the Shiites, it's Iran. Both countries are looking at the American withdrawal from Iraq from very different perspectives. From the point of view of the Iranians, this is the moment that they have been waiting for, i.e. the withdrawal of American forces, which creates a vacuum that Tehran can use to consolidate its influence in Iraq. On the other hand, the Saudis have been dreading this moment, and they see this as a threat to their national security. The Iranian attempt to consolidate its influence has to be countered from the Saudi point of view. How do you do that? Well, there aren't that many good options because Iran does have the upper hand. So what Riyadh is hoping is that the Sunnis can make use of this constitutional provision to create autonomous regions as a means of securing their influence in this post-Ba'athist Iraq. And one of the more interesting angles to the Iranian-Saudi struggle in post-American Iraq is the implications for Syria. From the point of view of Iran and its Iraqi allies, they don't want to see anyone using Iraqi territory, particularly that of the Sunni areas that border Syria, for action against the Syrian regime that's facing an uprising on the home front. Conversely, the Saudis and their allies would like to do just that. So the question is, how far are the Iranians and the Saudis willing to push their respective Iraqi proxies? Ousted Libyan leader Colonel Muammar al-Gaddafi was killed October 20th when rebel forces took his hometown of Sirte. Colonel Gaddafi's death is largely symbolic because it doesn't change the ground reality that he had ceased to be the ruler of his country when his forces left Tripoli and the capital was taken over by rebel forces. Therefore, the ground realities have not changed with Colonel Gaddafi's death because the NTC, the National Transitional Council, and its other rebel allies still need to demonstrate, and now more than ever before, that they can actually effectively run the country. The one thing that held all the rebels together was the presence of Muammar al-Gaddafi, even though the rebels had taken the capital. And the focus was to essentially put down any form of pro-Gaddafi resistance wherever it may be, especially in his hometown Sirte. And now that has been accomplished, And therefore, the next question is whether these rebel forces will continue to be able to hold their unity and not descend into a situation of chaos and civil war. There are two main forces that are centered in the two major cities of the country. The National Transitional Council, which was effectively a Benghazi-based entity and then relocated to the capital once the capital fell to the rebels. But in the capital, there is another entity called the Tripoli Military Council that is also distinguishing itself from the NTC. And then there are ethnic differences between Arabs and Berbers. There are ideological differences between Islamists and non-Islamists. So we have a very complex landscape that will somehow need to come together. And therefore, the biggest concern right now is how to disarm all the militias that have been active in fighting the Gaddafi regime and turn them into or integrate them into a new military force representing the new government, if and when the new republic is formed. Gaddafi's death, therefore, moves the country into the next phase, and which is the most difficult stage of this entire conflict, especially now that the country is awash with hundreds and thousands of fighters armed to the teeth, and the goal of securing the country and forming a new state remains elusive.